Assume that, and then Michael, one of the first things we need to make sure and be clear about is just because you are on someone else's property and you are injured does not mean you automatically have a claim.
Right.
This says you were working on someone else's property, so in order for them to be liable, you need to establish that they were in some way negligent, which means they failed to use due care under the circumstances. There could be some issues potentially about a workers' comp claim, but typically if you're working for somebody else on their property, you're going to be an independent contractor,
right.
and so you're going to need to establish negligence. If we're assuming that there was something they did wrong, for example, they had a hole on the property they knew about and didn't tell you about it, didn't warn you about it, didn't remedy, and you fell in it and you injured yourself, the statute of limitations that you're looking at now is 2 years. Historically, Florida had been 4 years. And this past year, back in 2023, they changed the law on that now, and for anything that happens after, I believe it's early March of that year, is going to be a 2-year statute of limitations. So depending on the timing, right now there can be a difference.
Now, Ted, that's big because
it is
4
big.
years to 2 years. You know, I'm assuming that Michael feels it if he's hurt because he's you know, quantifying the word injuries here.
Right.
But what about med pay? How does that work into this situation?
Well, there is the potential, another form of coverage that can be on homeowners policies, which is called medical payments coverage, which is a type of coverage that will pay irrespective of fault.
Right.
It is that kind of where you are the insurer of the premises under certain limitations, but typically if you have an injury that manifests and you get those bills paid, normally within, there's sometimes a limitation on that, sometimes it has to be paid within a year, just depends, it's specific to each policy. So even if there was not negligence, you possibly can recover under a medical payments provision under a homeowner's policy.
Now, assuming someone says, hey man, they paid me this medical payments coverage, they have to be liable. That's not always the case. That's not an admission of guilt or admission of fault, I should say.
And you won't look, you're not able to use it that way. There's actually evidentiary prohibitions against that under our evidence code that would not allow that to be admissible as some sort of admission of fault, because we want people to pay for medical treatment, we want people to get help, and we don't want them to not do that out of fear of some sort of concession. In any event, it's just not, as a practical matter, if they're required to pay it under the contract, it does not mean that they were negligent. They still could have been, it's just something you have to prove.
Now Ted, a quick question here would be, Michael obviously hasn't gone and gotten treatment. Well, at least I assume he hasn't. How is that different in an auto case?
Okay.
We have time limits in an auto case where somebody has to get treatment within a certain amount of time or they lose all benefits.
It can be that way, yes. And that's because of as many people have heard the term that Florida is a no-fault state. And I always like to say yes and no.
Right. Yes.
We are a no-fault state, but that does not necessarily mean what some people believe that it means. What it means is that in Florida, in an automobile accident, the legislature has made the decision that everyone will, in essence, be self-insured for the first $10,000 of any injuries. That is the personal injury protection, which is commonly referred to as your PIP benefits. And in order to maximize and to get the full benefit of that $10,000 in PIP benefits, you must seek and obtain treatment within 14 days of the accident. That needs to be, and they have to.
Now that's because it's on your own policy.
It's on your own policy.
Right.
Well, it's supposed to be on your own policy,
in a
subject to some exceptions. For
Right.
example, if you don't have auto insurance and you're in an accident as a passenger or as a pedestrian, you potentially qualify on either the vehicle that hits you or if you live with someone that has a policy. So even if you don't have your own policy, there still is likely to be PIP benefits available to you if you're in an auto accident. And it's important that you go seek that treatment or you lose that self-insurance for $10,000. It can be very detrimental.
You can't just go see anyone. There are certain providers that you have to get treatment from, and you have to be diagnosed with an emergency medical condition, right?
Right. Otherwise, you can be limited to $2,500 in coverage as opposed to the full $10,000
that you have paid for.
Right. And so you want to, as we tell people, our business is trying to make sure that you get whatever you're entitled to, and so that you know. I mean, information is power and it's key. You have to know what you have and what your options are, and we want to make sure first and foremost that you can get that treatment so that you can be back to as close as you were before the accident. You're never going to be exactly there, but we want to make sure that you get that treatment, and the first step is making sure that you have the benefits to get that treatment paid for.
What all? Let's just keep talking about the PIP the PIP policies, because I think that's very important. I think that a lot of people don't understand PIP.
Right.
They get very frustrated when we talk about no fault, and they're like, well, I wasn't at fault. Why is my insurance company paying? They're paying for my medical bills, but the other person was at fault. He was clearly at fault. He admitted he was at fault, but why am I paying? And is this going to affect my rates? But oftentimes we think of PIP paying for medical payments, but there's also provisions where PIP will actually pay for
lost wages
and lost wages or mileage.
It can potentially pay for up to 60%
but there's only so much
lost
that goes
wages.
around, though.
Right, and here's the thing also, even just as a rudimentary practical matter, the person that caused the accident is not going to pay for your treatment as you go.
Right.
That's the difference between a PIP benefit. This works in effect like health insurance and pays. They bill the PIP and it gets paid, and you're getting that treatment paid for as you go. Conversely, a liability policy will only pay when you resolve the case.
And they try to pay one time.
They typically can only pay one time, and that can be frustrating for people because they're like, well, charge it to the other person's insurance, and unfortunately, that's just not the way liability insurance works. And so, typically, we're looking at a situation where I tell people a lot of times when I ask, well, what's the timing of when is this going to be resolved? And it seems a little counterintuitive, but a lot of times the amount of the insurance, because in most situations the only practical recourse is the amount of insurance somebody has, because most people do not have assets that you can go after.
Now, I tell you, you brought up a good point there. In the liability policies, typically in most situations, pay one time.
Yes.
They write one check, and that one check comes with a piece of paper called a release. Now, that's why it's very important, if you've been involved in an accident, do not talk to the insurance companies until you have spoken to someone who can actually advocate for you. And we would highly encourage you to call an attorney that specializes in personal injury practice, so they can at least advise you of what you're signing or what you're giving away, because we've had a lot of cases over the years that have come through our office where the insurance company can go to someone's house after an accident, knock on the door, offer them a lot of money right now.
What seems like
a lot of money, and I'm talking about $2,000 or $3,000, $500, whatever it may be, and that person accepts the money, they cash the check, and they sign what is called a release. And that release has forever forbidden them from actually pursuing any claim from there on out for any injuries that may or may not have. Now, what's tricky about that is insurance companies get to the individuals who have been involved in accidents and are injured very, very quickly.
Yes.
And we've seen over the years of our careers, injuries don't manifest themselves just like that. You have a lot of swelling after an accident, and a lot of the injuries don't show up in diagnostic testing because of the swelling. And it takes several weeks and sometimes even months for physicians to be able to diagnose someone properly and give them a prognosis. And so if you sign away all of your rights early on, thinking that you're okay because you have to get back to work, well, then it's really hard to help you. And there's been times we've had to give the bad news to individuals who actually have signed these releases, but yet our legislature doesn't think that that's wrong, and they allow insurance companies to do that.
Right, and another gotcha is a lot of times people don't understand that they're assuming that their health insurance will pick up all the bills and take care of it, but they don't realize that those health insurance companies have what's called a right of subrogation, which means they get to be reimbursed out of any settlement proceeds. And the insurance company gives you a check for $2,000, and then here comes Blue Cross Blue Shield saying, hey, John Smith, you owe me that money. And so they don't explain that to you, and then I've had to have that conversation with, unfortunately, that's what your health insurance contract says. And if you had come and sought advice beforehand, you could have had that information and made a proper decision, because you have to have the information to make an educated decision.
And real quickly, we have a caller on the line, but real quickly, it's free to talk to us.
Yes.
We work on a contingency fee basis, so you're free to call us, to talk to us, to ask us these questions. And if you don't want to hire us, well, guess what? You don't owe us a dime.
No.
But at least you know.
Right.
Phone lines are open, 850-392-1544. You can always email us at lawcall@WMBB.com. We do have a caller on the line, Shauna from Panama City Beach.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Shauna.
Go ahead with your question.
So we had a loved one in a nursing home who had a fall and was unable to alert anyone other than the call button, but there's no alarm on the bed and there's no it's not a two-way communication. So they were just there on the floor with the call button in their hand until someone noticed it. So, and with another back injury, aggravated back injury from that.
Okay. Do you know how long they were on the floor?
No, we're not sure.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll just keep it very generic right now. Don't name a facility by any means, please. Shauna, there's a standard of care in medical malpractice where there's a reasonable standard of care, but also when you talk about nursing homes, there's a standard of care that someone has to be able to alert someone, and if they are have a back injury already and they are susceptible to falling or tripping or a hazard of such, well, nursing homes can be found liable.
Yes, they can.
For not giving proper assistance, I should say. I mean,
right.
And we're speaking very 30,000
right, because
view here.
Shauna, it can be very fact specific on, what level of supervision was she getting, what type of apparatus, the material, how long was she on the floor, because even if it was perfectly, if they were doing everything right, if they left her on the floor too long, that can become an issue. So we need to get into those facts, and we'd love for you to call us so we can make sure and get that taken care of. But to be clear, even if she had a prior back issue, if they aggravated pre-existing condition, that is potentially compensable under Florida law. So it's something that absolutely needs to be looked at and checked in for further, Shauna. We're really sad that your family member had that happen.
Well, Shauna, we can also put together the times through the medical records, and that will tell a lot. And after reviewing that, that will help us form a strategy to help understand if we can help you or not. But by all means, Ted's absolutely right. If they've breached the standard of care in the nursing home, in the nursing facility, we have had cases, very recent cases in the past, where we've had clients who have fallen and sustained significant injuries and been very successful in recoveries. So, Shauna, there very well may be a cause of action there, and but
those are difficult cases to handle on your home. They're very
specific. So. If you don't mind, we'll give you a call tomorrow morning and get more facts and give you the right direction. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Law Call. Phone lines are open, 850-392-1544. You can always email us your questions at lawcall@wmbb.com. We're taking your calls live. It's all about injuries, and I believe we have another caller on the line, Anthony from Enterprise. Anthony, go ahead with your question, sir.
Yeah, okay. My wife was hit from behind. She was a passenger on a car. The guy hit her with a Tesla. She went to the hospital the next night. She had to go to the emergency room from the pain, but she had already had prior injuries to her neck where she had surgery where she had a pin put through the back of her neck. The problem is when we tried to find out about the insurance, on the police report, there was no insurance listed. So when we come to find out the guy didn't have no insurance. So my question, and earlier, during the investigation part of at the scene, the police officer stated, we just stopped you about 40 minutes ago. You're supposed to have been going on to your sister's house. This is a different way from your sister's house. And he ran into the back of my wife. So, but he didn't have no insurance. Now they're saying that my wife's brother's insurance company is the one that's going to have to pay for it. What about the guy? Am I going to have to get a lawyer to sue him?
Anthony, quick question, brother. How do you know that he doesn't have insurance?
Okay, I just said when the police, what's called the insurance company went to find out that I have insurance. She had insurance. See, because I have insurance on her. So when I had the insurance company to go to check to see if he had insurance, they said he had no insurance.
Okay, because Anthony, it's not unusual, especially if this gentleman was potentially arrested at the scene, for them not to get his insurance information. Sometimes it doesn't show up on the crash report, right, even though they might have it. But even if this individual does not have insurance, it does not mean he does not have liability and exposure. Right. We purchase insurance in order to protect us if we're in a lawsuit. And actually, in Alabama, it's mandatory. It's required that you have at least $25,000 per person and $50,000 per accident in bodily injury coverage, because you did mention your wife was a passenger. So
assuming that the guy was from Alabama.
Right. Yeah, that is correct. So I don't know that he is, even though he is in Alabama, he may have been out of state, an out-of-state driver. We have a lot of those here in Florida. But absolutely, Anthony, that's something that needs to be looked into and pursued, because just because you don't have insurance, and I'm not, I mean, who knows? I mean, I'd want to make sure there was a thorough investigation of whether or not the person had coverage, who owned the vehicle, if that person had coverage, anything that might have potentially insured it, because I believe you mentioned that was a Tesla, which is a fairly nice vehicle, so you would hope that someone would have some level of insurance on that.
There's multiple layers too, Anthony. So Ted's right. I mean, there's a lot of information that we need to get to answer your question. Number one, yes, you do need to seek an attorney to help you. You necessarily don't have to sue this individual right away, because there may be ways that the attorney that you retain can help you get the information that you need and get the case resolved that's most favorable for you, and you don't have to go through the litigation process.
Right.
Now, just because this individual does not have insurance does not mean that he's not
insured in some way.
He was not insured in some way, or the vehicle that he was driving was not insured in some way. And what I mean by that, Anthony, if I loan Ted my car, and he gets in an accident, well, then guess what? My insurance company is on the hook, and I'm on the hook if Ted causes an accident and he's at fault and someone wants to pursue a claim, they can pursue a claim against me and my insurance company. Same way with this individual who hit your wife in the Tesla. He may not have been the owner of the Tesla. He may have just been driving the Tesla, and he may have been driving his sister's Tesla, whom he was supposed to go to her sister's house. So to answer your question, yes, you do need to seek an attorney to help you with this. There's ways that we have, and I like to say, to get people's attention, but also we can get information for you too and help you make not an educated guess, but an educated decision about what you should or should not do.
The best path for your family.
Right.
And both Larry Perry and I are licensed in Alabama and handle cases routinely all over the state of Alabama.
And like I said before the break, also, Anthony, if you choose to retain our law firm, we handle our cases on a contingency fee basis, and you don't owe us any money up front, and we get paid when the case is resolved.
Right. Don't owe us anything unless we make a recovery for you, which would require us to either find assets for this individual or an insurance policy that potentially triggered. But there's also, as we've talked many times, uninsured motorist coverage that potentially triggers here, possibly on your policy, possibly on the owner of the vehicle's policy that she was in.
Now, Ted, for our viewers, kind of switching gears into a UM conversation here, It's not mandatory in the state of Florida. Is it mandatory in Alabama?
It is not mandatory in the state of Alabama,
Okay.
But it's something that you may have, especially, and like you said, you don't just look at your own policy for that.
Right.
That's something that we see many times that gets missed. Is the first look is, it's a protection that you buy in order to make sure that there's insurance available if the individual that hits you does not have insurance or does not have enough to compensate you fully for your claim. So you always first look at your own policy, then you look at any policies of any relatives that you live with.
Yes.
And also in a case like this, when you're in someone else's car that gets hit, you want to look at that person's policy as well, because it very likely extends to you as a passenger.
So Anthony, coming back again to you, buddy. Absolutely, you need to seek an attorney to help you. There's multiple layers that need to be uncovered and investigated to determine whether or not there's insurance available to help you and your wife out. And although she has pre-existing conditions, that does not mean that those have not been exacerbated
Right.
because or made worse by this accident. That's just, you kind of find your plaintiff as you find them.
And if possible, you want to get her in to see that surgeon that did that original procedure as soon as possible, to have that properly imaged and make sure that that hardware that's in there hasn't moved, hasn't altered in any way, because that's the most important thing here, is we want to make sure your wife's okay. So get her in there and have someone do proper imaging that is a surgeon that can look at, ideally the one who did the initial procedure. If that's not available, get you someone that can give you an opinion on that sooner rather than later.
Anthony, thank you for your call, man. Phone lines are still open, 850-392-1544, or you can always email us at lawcall@wmbb.com. We're going to take our last break of the evening and be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Law Call tonight. Phone lines are still open. If you got a question, we'll try to get it in at the last minute, 850-392-1544, or you can always email us at lawcall@wmbb.com. There are some calls that did come through. We were not able to get those because the calls dropped, but we actually did get the information, and we'll be glad to reach out to you tomorrow morning and discuss your case in further detail. Ted, we've talked all about injuries. We've had nursing home slip and falls. We've had auto accidents. We've had property injuries where somebody slipped in a hole or they were working on a property or something. The nursing home, that's kind of an anomaly. That's not a case that happens all the time. Falling on somebody's property or getting injured on somebody's property, that happens a lot, but it's not like auto accidents. Auto accidents occur every day. And here in Panama City, if you're trying to get from Panama City to Panama City
184
Beach, you're going to figure out that there's a lot of cars on the highway.
Right. And no matter how safe you are, you cannot protect yourself from everybody else that's on the road.
Right. Well, you can't, but you can. And the
Well,
best
you
way
can
to
do things.
The
Right.
best way to do that to protect yourself
Very true.
is basically through uninsured motorist coverage. And just
Correct.
real quickly, conversation about that. When you look at your policy, make sure that you have what's called uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage. Sometimes it's hidden in your policy, sometimes it's in the declarations page, but a portion of it that I know that's hidden in your policy, and you got to really look for it on that deck page, is whether it's stackable or unstackable. Because I've noticed in my policy, I had to go back and look to make sure, and it's further down on the piece of paper there, and I'm like, what in the world, But
Well, stackable is if you're going to make sure, if you have, especially if you have multiple vehicles, you
Right.
want to make sure you look and have stackable insurance, which means it multiplies the amount of coverage. If you're paying premiums for multiple vehicles, then,
Right.
for example, if there's 2 vehicles, you have double the coverage. If there's 3, there's triple. And then there even becomes additional layers of complexity if you have umbrella coverage. Sometimes you can stack
Right.
with umbrella, sometimes you have to leave them unstacked. So make sure you have that property analyzed
Yes.
and looked at before you get in an accident.
Right.
Because afterwards it becomes impossible to change.
And if you have questions, call your agent. If you have more questions, you can call our law firm. We'll be
Yes.
glad to take your call and talk to you. We love talking insurance, and the most important thing is we want to make sure that you're taken care of and that you're protected, and you understand what you've purchased, and you understand what you have not purchased, because you can waive that when you purchase your policy.
Right.
Ted, we've got 1 minute left of shout outs. You want to?
I know I got my cousin Brooke is watching. Go Gators and go Brooke. And then I believe we have Uncle Roy Myers also watching again. So I stole your shout out there. So
Well, I'm gonna steal yours then. I'm on Judd. Shout out to
he's
Judd.
way asleep at this point.
But he's gonna come back and watch this. Vivian and Heather and Jan and Randy.
There you go. That was pretty good.
And Juddy.
Yeah, Juddy should be watching
he
that.
should.
No, hold on. And my wonderful mother-in-law Janet.
I was setting you up for that.
Don't even forget.
My
that
wife
one.
is watching. She's sitting there with the boss man in bed watching. Well, he's probably snoring.
Yeah.
But my mom is watching. Trey Smith, Judy Smith, Miss Paula Frederick, Miss Pam Myers. I'm gonna give Uncle Roy a shout out too. And you have his shoes on the way yet?
I don't know. He tells me I have some coming.
right.
We'll see. I believe it.
And all of our friends down at the Grand Marlin, we thank you for joining us this evening. And LawCall will be back next week, same time, same place, same
channel.
hour, same channel. Maybe 2 different faces.
But you can also see us on Facebook. That's a pretty neat thing,
Yes.
wherever you are.
Yep. So, good evening and have a safe week.